Hello everyone, this is Medhavi Nema and today we are going to talk about reading comprehensions. So reading comprehensions are something that are a major part of all the verbal ability or the English sections of all the competitive examinations that we can think of. And these questions are easy to solve, easy to comprehend, and are a must do in the final paper because they require comparatively less efforts and give you more correct answers. If you read a passage carefully, comprehend it carefully, you will be able to answer 4 or 5 questions out of 5 questions. So, without wasting any time, let's get started. So, I would like to share a few tips and tricks that I like to use when I read the passages or solve the reading comprehensions. So, the first thing that I like to follow is that I read the questions first, so that basically I get the gist of what the paper is asking me to do. Because sometimes the questions are so straightforward, you don't even actually have to read the passage. You can just catch the keywords and locate them in the passage and just give the right answer. Because I understand that we do not have a lot of time when we are giving the paper, and we have a lot of things to do because the sections are timed in IPMAT, but like in the other papers as well, we don't have a lot of time. So I understand that we cannot read complete passages, but yes, this is something that will help you in marking at least 2 or 3 questions out of 5, which is a good score provided that you are not reading the passage, right? Do not attempt all 5 without reading the passage. They might go in the wrong way and fetch you negative marks. But yes, read the questions so that you get the gist of what the paper is asking you. The second thing that I want to tell you is that don't memorize the passages, okay? So, some of us have the habit of reading with the intention of storing things in our brain, which is not very relevant here because, talking from an exam point of view, you really don't want to spend so much time reading the passage and storing it in your brain. You can always go back to the passage the next time. So, this brings me to the third point: learn to skim. Just skim through the passage, just know which part of the paragraphs contain what particular thing, so that when you go to the questions, you know from which part of the passage this question is there, so that you can come back to the passage, read that particular passage paragraph again, and then solve the questions. This will A, give you confidence, B, save your time. Moving on to the first passage, just like I said, I'll show you the questions first. You can see by looking at the questions that it is something related with ants, the behavior of ants, or something like that. Yeah, so here we have the first passage. You can pause the video, read the passage on your own, and then probably I would like to explain the passage to you. The passage talks about ants, okay? So it reads: the communities of ants are sometimes very large, numbering even up to 500 individuals. And it is a lesson to us that no one has ever yet seen quarrel between any two ants belonging to the same community. On the other hand, it must be admitted that they are in hostility not only with other insects, including not only with most other insects, including ants of different species, but even with those of the same species if belonging to different communities. So, here we have seen that they say that two ants will never quarrel if they belong to the same community, but they will quarrel with each other because they have hostility with the ants of other communities. Okay. I have over and over again introduced ants from one of my nests into another nest of the same species, and they were invariably attacked, seized by a leg or an antenna, and dragged out. Okay, so by this sentence, I can assume, or I should assume, that the author here is a person who is very much interested into ants. He breeds them, or he has their nests or something, and he's very much interested in learning about the behavior of ants. Okay, so next thing, it is evident therefore that the ants of each community all recognize each other, which is very remarkable. But more than this, I several times divided a nest into two halves and found that even after separation of a year and 9 months, they recognized one another perfectly and were perfectly friendly, while they at once attacked ants from a different nest, although of the same species. So, what the author is trying to say that no matter what happens, the ants will definitely recognize the ants of their own community and will be hostile towards the ants of the other community. Then, it has been suggested that the ant of each nest must have some sign or password by which they recognize one another. Okay, to test this, I made some of them insensible. First, I tried chloroform, but it was fatal to them. Okay, so he tried chloroform and some of the ants died. And I did not consider the test satisfactory. Well, obviously. I decided, therefore, to intoxicate them. This was less easy than I had expected. None of my ants would voluntarily degrade themselves by getting drunk. Okay, so he tried getting his ants drunk. However, I got over difficulty by putting them into whiskey for a few moments. I took 50 specimens, 25% from one nest and 25% from another, made them drunk dead, marked each other with a spot of paint, and put them on a table close to where other ants from one of the nests were feeding. The table was surrounded as usual with a moat of water to prevent them from straying. The ants which were feeding soon noticed those which I had made drunk. They seemed quite astonished to find their comrades in such a disgraceful condition, and as much as a loss to know what to do with their drunkards as we were. After a while, however, they carried them all away. The strangers they took to the edge of the moat and dropped into the water, while they bore their friends home into the nest, where by degrees they slept off the effects of the spirits. Thus, it is evident that they know their friends even when incapable of giving any sign or password. So, what we can conclude from the passage is that one, the author is trying to establish a connection between the ants of the same community, how they're able to recognize each other. Is it through a sign or password, or is it some visual characteristic or something like that? But here we see that the ants can identify the other ants of the same community even without giving a sign or password. So that is a conclusion that the author has drawn. And yeah, so they took the other ants as well, but they just dropped them into the water and took their friends home into the nest. So this is something that tells us that they actually have something through which they can recognize their community members, but what thing in particular, that stays a mystery. So the first question says, an appropriate title for this passage might be. Okay, so we have four options. The first one is Nature's Mysteries, Human Qualities in Insect World, Drunken Ants, Communication and Communities. Okay, so the right answer is option number D, Communication and Ants Communities. So the option A cannot be the answer because it talks about nature's mysteries. Okay, but if you look at the passage very, very carefully, all we talk about is ants, not nature in general. We don't talk about any other organism. So nature's mystery would be a very, very wide title for this passage, hence cannot be our answer. The second one, human qualities in insect world. This is really vague, you know. I don't like, this is a very, very vague option. This can not be the answer. The third one is drunken ants. Okay, so this is also vague because the author did put them into whiskey, but it's not about ants drinking or something. So by elimination and by my common sense, I feel that the answer is option number D, which is communication in ants communities, because the whole point of the passage was that the author wanted to know how the ants communicate or identify each other. Moving on to the next question. Attitudes of ants towards strangers of the same species may be categorized as. Okay, so the answer of this question is C, hostile. This is because the ants attack the other ants of the same species but of different communities, right? So the answer would be hostile. Then the next question: the author's anecdotes of the inebriated ants would support all the following inductions except the statement that A. Ants take unwillingly to intoxicants. Ants aid comrades in distress. Ants have invariable recognition of their community members. Ants recognize their comrades by a mysterious password. So the answer is clearly option number D, because we had concluded in the last passage, in the last line, that there are no particular signs or passwords that the ants use to communicate with each other. In the end, I would just like to say that push yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. Practice, practice, practice. It'll make you perfect. And please visit our Telegram channel to get the assignment, solve it, and you'll be good to go. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the session, and bye bye.